His question is, enlighten us, he said, on the workings of karma, how karma transforms into sin, and how do we get rid of that? Okay, how do you then redeem yourselves? Nahi devrita shaktam tattum karmana sheshata yastu karma phalatyagi satyagitta vidhyate. First of all, let it be very clear, Kanthai, Krishna says, that it is not possible to renounce your karma. Even somebody who's doing nothing is doing something with their thoughts, with their speech, or with their actions. Now, that is established, he says. So if we can perform those actions with a sense of detachment, you are redeemed, he says. Does that mean that we can go and hurt somebody and say, well, I did that with great detachment, here, I'm away, and I'm redeemed? Of course not. I think what happens is, when we talk about detachment, if you're truly detached, you're driven by the outcome, no question about it. But if you're somewhat detached by the outcome in the sense that, look, I'm trying my best and that's all I can do. If it's bound to happen, it will. I'll keep trying until it doesn't. You will naturally start to experience a kind of a wave of peace and calm wash over you. And you will experience that quietude of the mind. And if that happens, in that quiescence, in that quietude, you're unlikely to then do wrong things. Unlikely to do things that you will regret later on. And that's really, in a nutshell, what constitutes a sin is a deeper question. So, a fundamental thing would be, when we hurt somebody, when we are hurting, harming, injuring anybody, in any way, at least intentionally, that is perhaps a sin. But is it really? If a soldier is standing at the border and he or she shoots the enemy, have they committed a sin or not? And that is the very basis of the whole Mahabharata, that the notion of what is right and what is wrong can never be marked in black and white. And that's what the world religions have tried to do, eternally chucking everybody in guilt. So, how to redeem ourselves? Wisdom, knowledge, awakening will set you free. But there is a difference between knowledge and understanding. Huge difference. When you are awakened, you develop the understanding. When you're just well read, or you've heard a lot of people and so on, you're well educated or not, you may be just knowledgeable. And here is a difference. In knowledge, you know what you can do. In knowledge, you know what all you can do. In understanding, you know what you have to do. In knowledge, you know the options, you know the path. And as a consequence, there is great confusion as well. But in understanding, there is no confusion. You understand, it's like when you first learned arithmetic and you went through some sums of some equations of addition, and you said, okay, 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 plus 4 is 6, and so on. But the moment you develop the understanding of 2 plus 4 is actually 6 and why it is 6 and so on, you were never confused Anytime anybody would ask you, you have these three questions. What is the right answer? 2 plus 4 equals question mark. What is it? A, B, C, 4 answers. You would immediately pick what's right. That understanding comes over a period of time with sustained contemplation, some grace, and committing to a life of wisdom. There was a person, a philosopher once, and he met his friend who was deeply religious. He was a theologian. Now, obviously, somebody who believed deeply in religion, as this theologian did, he believed that God did everything. That everything was predestined, or everything is predestined. But the philosopher had a different point of view. The philosopher said, no, there is a thing called free will. If everything is predestined, then we are never responsible for all the karma that we do then. But the theologian said, well, I believe in God. Everything is predestined. The philosopher said, okay, let's agree to disagree then. After 4 hours, their wives were calling, they had to go home. And he said, let's agree to disagree. And the theologian said, well, I was predestined to disagree with you. But you had a free will. You could have walked away any point in time, but you didn't. That's the end of the joke in case. So, in other words, it's a very nuanced theme. And if we simplify it, we'll be doing so at the expense of ridiculing the depth of this question. Because some things are always playing a role in us making a decision, but ultimately we choose our actions. Somebody who's disabled in a wheelchair is still free to choose what the meaning of disability is to them. And truly, I read this thing, the only disabling thing perhaps in life, the only real disability is to have a disabling attitude towards things. So when it comes to what we go through in life, what is karma and how do we redeem ourselves and what is sin, I'll give you this example that a disciple asked this master the same question. And the master said, imagine you being hit with an arrow. Let's say you were walking and out of nowhere an arrow came and hit you and pierced your shoulder. It'll hurt a lot. It'll hurt. Now imagine you pull it out and before this wound heals, you're hit at the same place again. It's going to hurt even more. All of us must have experienced, not emotionally, that must have happened a million times, but physically, sometimes you get hit somewhere and you end up hitting yourself again precisely at the same point because you were avoiding real hard to not hurt yourself again there. The first arrow, the master said, are the challenges life throws at you, a lot of which are not in your control. They are set. The second arrow is how you chose to respond to what you had to deal with in the first place. That is in our control. The first wound that's inflicted upon us sometimes may not be due to our fault. You could be walking totally sane on the sidewalk in the evening, and a drunk driver comes from out of nowhere and rams his car into you, and suddenly you find yourself in the hospital for the next 6 months. You were not at fault at all, but you're suffering for some reason. You're in pain. You have to undergo the most undesirable 6 months of your life. But the moment I start to question that, why did this terrible time have to descend upon me? Why God? Why Lord? That it's natural to some degree, but that shows ignorance. That shows somehow we believed that God's job is to be our bouncer. I will not let anything touch you. I'll keep everybody away. It's not really. Every time, in any avatar, in any reincarnation, in any religion for that matter, just see how much those avatars, those enlightened beings went through. What was it that was going through their minds that they still held on to their faith? Not only they held on to their faith, they propounded it throughout the world. They stood on the rooftops and shouted top of their lungs that this divinity is real. Clearly, they had an understanding of something that the ordinary person out there doesn't. And that is, nothing matters eventually. We don't have to take ourselves, our perspectives, our viewpoints so seriously. If you do so at your own peril. You'll always be in conflict. And conflict is the basis of all human relationships. They even say all is vanity. But conflict truly is the basis of all human relationships. In every relationship, there is somehow a constant play of power and dominion over the other person. However subtle it may be, however sweet it may be, conflict can also be positive. You rub two flint stones and it will create a spark. But if you realize that this is how it is, take it or leave it, you will be less tempted to do things that you will then regret later on. And to sum it up, I'll just say, if you're here on this planet, that means you are redeemed. Let that sink in. If you're breathing on this planet, you're redeemed. There is some force in the universe that sees value in you. There is some force in the universe that has feelings of love for you. There is something going on in the extraordinary play of this cosmos that has decided that you are of use and therefore you cannot perish just yet, and therefore you must stay on and the show must go on. Because the moment nature decides that you are of no use, we perish. The body decomposes, it's recycled. A fruit, once it's fallen from the tree, it'll stay fresh for a little while, then it'll start to decompose, decay, and so on. Nature does not keep anything that's of no use to it. And if that is true, if you have the buy-in from the highest level, what do you really care about all the other things, everybody else in the world? Sometimes people, when they're looking for life partners, they have questions, can I marry this person? Can I marry that person? Or how do I marry? And so on. I always say, look, you develop self-esteem and self-love. If you've experienced void, fill that void with yourself first, and you will attract the right person then. But if somehow you are hoping that you've created this emotional void, this gorge in your consciousness, and somebody else should come and shovel in and fill it, spend their entire life doing that, it's too much to ask for. Because life does not work that way. It never has, never will. That is not the play of universe. I feel my answer is pretty long already. It reminded me of this little something. This pastor was giving a sermon in the church, and in the audience was this father and his daughter. And the pastor would say, finally, and everybody would say, oh, thank God, this is coming to an end. But he would go on and on and on. And then after a few minutes, he'd say, so finally, and then it would go on and on and on again. So this daughter whispered to his father, Dad, what does the pastor mean when he says finally? Nothing at all, my daughter, nothing at all. It means nothing. So sometimes I keep going on and on, reminding me this. Mark Twain once went to this sermon. He said, I loved it so much. I thought when the plate would come for a donation, I'm going to put in $10. And he said, as I sat there and it went on a bit longer, I changed my mind to $5. He said the priest still wouldn't shut up. He would keep talking and keep talking. He said, I decided $1 is more than enough for this guy. The sermon just wouldn't end. He said, finally, when the plate came, I took $5 and went home. So that's that.